With the midterm elections just 5 days away, it appears there is a little bit of both major parties agreeing on one particular thing here. According to a recent CBS News poll, there's a thing that Democrats and Republicans do see eye to eye on.
Yeah, 50% agree that in the next 2 years, Americans will be more divided than they are now. 34% say the division in our country will remain the same, and 13% believe Americans will be more united. So for more on this, we want to bring in Dr. Martha Nussbaum. She's a law and philosophy professor at the University of Chicago. So my first question for you, Doctor, is I know there's this sense that we're more divided than ever before. Are we actually more divided than ever before?
Well, look, I think that's hard to measure, but I would say that what we really need to do is take a deep breath, pause, and learn how to talk to one another again. And my brief is that philosophy really helps us do that because it teaches us to think about an argument and to try to understand our concepts and understand ourselves before we leap in and make claims.
So, Doctor, what's driving this fear, this spike in partisanship? Because it's always been my understanding, if you just watch, if you are sort of somewhat familiar with American political history, that generally Americans, at least over the course of the last, 100 years or so, are generally more or less center. Right? And some people may drift center right, some people may drift center left, but Americans generally don't like extremists on either side. Are you seeing a change in that?
Well, I actually think that there are real issues that are pushing people to the extremes. And on the right, it's insecurity because of the loss of traditional working class jobs and the replacement of people by automation and also outsourcing of jobs. So those are real problems that we need to think about, and we need to figure out how to solve the loss in status that happens to working class people when automation takes over. But on the left, it's the fear of, well, I think everywhere, it's the fear of not having health insurance and being bankrupted by a health crisis. But it's also the fear that somehow elites are running our lives and that working class people really don't have any voice.
But I almost feel like people from both parties sort of believe that last bit that you said, for sure. I think that that's probably what makes people feel sort of insecure and angry, is this idea that you have no real dominion over your destiny, right? And it certainly sort of seems like both political parties are sort of inching further and further away from the center, like what you said, Vlad. It seems like Democrats are becoming more progressive, if you want to use the phrase progressive. I think on the other side they'd say more left, and Republicans seem to be sort of inching to more conservative. So when we talk about the numbers, I mean, what do you foresee in our future? Will we become more divided as we move forward?
Okay, first of all, I don't think there's any reason to think Democrats are becoming more progressive. Actually, if you look at the people who are running for Congress, the new people who've jumped into politics, the central issue is health care, and that's a truly bipartisan issue. On the right, I don't really believe it either. It's just that these voices are magnified on the internet. I think a part of the problem is the new communications technologies that magnify extreme voices and circulate false and highly rhetorical statements.
I think that's such an interesting point. You always have to remind yourself when you read the comment section underneath an article that, you're not getting a cross-section of the opinions. You're getting a cross-section of the opinions of people who want to write those comments. Most people don't write a comment. They just read the article and move on.
No, that's right. It's like when you read a rating of some store or some hotel, it's the people who have a lot to complain about who write in. And, but I do think that when I look at my students, I see growing mistrust and defensiveness. And I am really concerned about that. I don't think the positions are more extreme, but I think their perception of what the other side's positions is that they're more extreme, and therefore they don't feel so trusting when they want to talk to other students.
It certainly feels, and, as we have covered, many parts of this country over the course of the last couple of years in the wake of the 2016 election, and even before that during the Obama administration, that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, a lot of what drives you is fear. And what savvy politicians on both sides of the aisle do is seek to exploit our fears. And if that means that it's going to cause a division between neighbors, and now you're hearing about divisions within families themselves, so be it. We're getting our agenda accomplished.
Yeah, look, I think that all human beings have a lot of fear. And it's quite reasonable in a way, because we're all going to die someday, and it's reasonable to fear our own death, I think. And if anytime you love someone or something, you're going to have fear for the safety of that thing. But then fear can be hijacked and manipulated for political gain by using false and inflammatory rhetoric. And so, you know, there are politicians who have calmed our fears. And here I would include George W. Bush, who after 9/11 was very careful to calm the fears of the American public and to say we're not demonizing Islam and Muslims. But then there are politicians who whip up and inflame fear in a very dangerous way.
You know, the president retweeted a election video. And it, you know, sort of really capitalizes on this concern about immigrants. It profiles a man who came here illegally, who is there you go, there you have it, who killed a police officer. A lot of people, it reminded them of the Willie Horton ad. Same idea, you know, right. This rotation of criminality coming in and coming out of our country, and we have no control over it. Here's, you know, the thing about it is the Willie Horton ad worked for George W. Bush. And so he received a lot of criticism, and it's a sort of a bit of a black mark that he went there, but it works. Fear works. So what I wanted to ask you, Doctor, is why does fear work so well? And, you know, what role should the president play when it comes to this sort of thing, when it comes to easing our fears or not? Well, I think it works so well because we are vulnerable and we're mortal, and we carry around with us a lot of fear all the time. But then what we need is true facts and calm deliberation. And I'll just tell you that 2 days ago in our law school, we're setting up a number of discussions on issues that inspire fear and anxiety. And we try to pair faculty members of different political persuasions. So I had a discussion of gay rights and the bakery cases with my conservative colleague, Will Bode, who's a well-known conservative. And, you know, what was so great about that, I'm sure the students did come in with all kinds of suspicions and fears, but we were able to get them talking to each other in a reasonable and deliberative way, and we actually reached a lot of consensus on what should happen going forward about those issues. That's what we need society-wide, and we need leaders who can promote that and not hysteria. Does that work as well, though? I mean, it doesn't feel like it. To me, it feels as if the only thing that can win over fear, Doctor, is education. In other words, you know, when I was afraid of flying, I am afraid to fly, but it's part of what I do for a living. And so I educated myself on how planes work, on, you know, the mortality rates and all the stuff that you need to know. Or when I was a young Army cadet at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I was afraid of rappelling off the side of a building the very first time I did it. They showed me how the belay works and how, you know, I'd be safe from falling, and then it was fine. And so I wonder, if you're worried about healthcare, if you're worried about, you know, the caravan, you may not know that it's 800 miles away. You may not know that the U.S. military can actually do absolutely nothing if they see people trying to cross the border illegally because it's against the law. That would alleviate your fears, would it not? But you have to be in pursuit of that independently. I don't think people are motivated to be educated. Yeah, that's right. You have to look for correct facts. You have to not rush into the arms of this rather comforting kind of hysterical rhetoric. But, you know, it's not just the true facts being there and seeking them out, but you also have to get the experience of talking to people with whom you disagree. It's experience, right? I used to be terrified of public speaking. And now, you know, I'm not so terrified because I've done a lot of it. I used to even be terrified of teaching. So, you know, you just get in the habit of doing something, and immediately it becomes part of you, who you are, and what you seek out, and it's not so fearful. So we have to promote zones in our democracy where people come together and they speak with civility and respect, and they talk together across party lines. Dr. Nussbaum, really good advice. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.